Imagine a place where every word weighed like a sentence, where speaking too much could mean disappearing, where silence was not the absence of sound, but an oppressive, constant, watchful presence. That place existed. It was called the Gulag. More than forced labor camps scattered across the vast Soviet landscape, the Gulag was a system designed to break the human spirit. Extreme cold, calculated hunger, exhausting labor, and permanent surveillance all served a clear purpose: to reduce people to obedient bodies stripped of identity, memory, and voice. There, names lost their meaning. Personal histories became irrelevant. The past had to be forgotten. The future was unthinkable. Only the present remained, harsh, repetitive, and brutal. And yet, even in an environment engineered to erase every trace of humanity, something persisted, something the system never fully managed to control: the need for expression. The silence of the Gulag was not natural. It was imposed. Every barracks carried an invisible tension. Prisoners quickly learned that words could be used as weapons against themselves. A poorly interpreted comment, a memory spoken aloud, a confession at the wrong moment, anything could be twisted into evidence of deviation, sabotage, or betrayal. As a result, silence became its own language. Glances replaced sentences, pauses carried meaning. The smallest gestures said more than entire speeches. In this narrow space between fear and the need to exist, a different form of communication was born, one that did not need to be written, nor recorded, nor even heard by those who did not know how to listen. There were no musical instruments in the Gulag, no paper to compose on, no permission to sing. Officially, music did not exist, but that did not stop it from emerging. Prisoners began creating songs that would never be written down, melodies that lived only in memory, rhythms marked by footsteps during labor, soft taps against frozen wooden walls, short verses, easy to memorize, passed along like secrets. Some songs were fragments of old melodies, reshaped to fit their new reality. Others were entirely new, born there, forged by hunger, cold, and the absence of visible hope. To avoid suspicion, many were disguised as folk tales or simple children's tunes. Others existed only as rhythm, without words, so that nothing could be reported. It was an invisible symphony, unwritten, unrecorded, yet profoundly alive. Singing out loud was far too dangerous, so people sang in their minds, or in whispers barely audible, shared only when trust was absolute. At times, an entire group carried the same melody without ever singing it together. Each person held a fragment of the song. Together, they formed the whole. This practice was more than creativity. It was psychological survival. Music helped preserve sanity in an environment that constantly pushed the limits of the human mind. It organized inner chaos, created rhythm where there was only mechanical repetition, gave shape to time when every day felt exactly the same. Over time, the songs stopped speaking only of longing. They became sharper, more conscious, more dangerous. Verses began to carry veiled criticism of the regime, subtle irony about power, metaphors that spoke of freedom without ever using the word. Those inside understood, those outside heard only harmless noise. These songs were not just comfort, they were defiance. Creating art where art was forbidden was already an act of resistance. Turning that art into critique, even coded, required extraordinary courage. If discovered, punishment could be immediate and brutal. And yet, the songs continued to be born, because for many, to stop singing, even in silence, was to accept total defeat. The songs created invisible bonds. People who would never openly speak recognized one another through the melody they carried. A discrete rhythm tapped out was enough to identify an ally. An unfinished verse, completed by someone else, sealed a deep connection. In an environment of enforced distrust, music rebuilt trust. It reminded prisoners they were not alone, that a we still existed, even when everything conspired toward absolute isolation. Collective identity survived there, hidden between notes no one could confiscate. The songs were not alone. They were part of something larger, a vast, invisible fabric of shared narratives. Entire poems were memorized and passed from person to person. Jokes circulated, often dark, as a way to laugh at the absurdity of their own situation. Life stories were told in fragments, reconstructed collectively so that no one would be forgotten. These narratives functioned as living archives. They preserved memory where no records existed, transmitted information where communication was controlled, created meaning where the system imposed only suffering. To tell a story in the Gulag was an act of defiance. It was a declaration that life still mattered. The Gulag system was designed to control everything: time, space, the body, but something continually escaped its grasp: the collective mind. The guards knew something circulated beneath the silence. They suspected it, they punished it, they intensified surveillance. But they could not seize what left no physical trace. There was no paper to confiscate, no instruments to destroy, no evidence to collect. The songs existed only as long as they were remembered, and that made them indestructible. Many never left the camps. Their names vanished from records, their bodies were buried in ice, but something of them remained. A remembered verse, a repeated rhythm, a story passed on. These invisible songs traveled through time inside those who survived. Some were eventually shared, others remained forever unheard. Still, they fulfilled their purpose. They sustained spirits, preserved dignity, kept alive the idea that even under absolute oppression, human beings find ways to resist. Today, as we listen to these distant echoes, we understand that the Gulag was not only a place of extreme suffering, it was also a stage for silent, creative, profoundly human resistance. The unwritten songs do not appear in music books, yet they carry immeasurable value. They prove that art does not depend on instruments nor permission. It is born from the need to exist. These voices, once suffocated, now find space to be heard, not as melodies, but as testimony, as reminders that human dignity can be wounded, but never completely destroyed. Even in the deepest silence, hope found a voice.